the Vietnamese people and the government of the DRVN. From John Sidney Mccain, 624787, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy, born 29 August 1936, Panama, home state, Florida. Shot down 26 October 1967, A-4E aircraft. I, as a U.S. Airman, am guilty of crimes against the Vietnamese country and people. I have bombed their cities, towns, and villages and caused many injuries, even death, to the people of Vietnam. I was captured in the capital city of Hanoi while attacking it. After I was captured, I was taken to the hospital in Hanoi, where I received very good medical treatment. I was given an operation on my leg, which allowed me to walk again, and a cast on my right arm, which was badly broken in 3 places. The doctors were very good, and they knew a great deal about the practice of medicine. I remained in the hospital for some time and regained much of my health and strength. Since I arrived in the camp of detention, I have received humane and lenient treatment. I received excellent treatment and food, even though I came here as an aggressor, and the people who I injured have much difficulty in their living standards. I wish to express my deep gratitude for my kind treatment, and I will never forget this kindness extended to me.
Why is this important? Charles Johnson, founder of WeSearchR.com, a new media company dedicated to investigative journalism, explained his reasons on True News, an internet streamcast run by host Rick Wiles.
And I know our audience is shaking their heads in disbelief, wondering, is this for real? How do we know this is John McCain? Charles, you convinced me and the True News staff that this is an authentic recording. And we decided to release it tonight. That's why this program is being released somewhat late in the day. Because we had a lot of discussions today about whether to release this audio. I mean, my gosh, we're talking about John McCain.
Right.
And for me, this has been a very difficult choice to make, a very difficult decision to make. Do we release this audio? Why are you certain that this audio is authentic, that this is the voice of John McCain?
We obtained the audio recording from the National Archives. It is
the National Archives in Washington, D.C.?
Correct. And it was actually mislabeled while it was there.
You're telling me that the National Archives of the United States of America had a recording of John McCain on North Vietnamese radio?
That's right. And what's more is that this broadcast comes from the Foreign Broadcast Information Service, which was a branch.
That was the CIA.
This branch of the CIA.
They monitored all shortwave radio.
That's right. And so
and they were out of Panama for a long time.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. That's right. Yeah. And so for a very long time, there had been a number of U.S. servicemen who had claimed that they had heard John McCain essentially doing a Tokyo Rose style betrayal of his country. And these servicemen were more or less ignored. They were marginalized, and they were sort of cast aside as kooks and cranks. And so I had known that this audio was out there. And so about 6 or 7 months ago at Got News, we put up a bounty to anyone who could go and prove it. And we did this in the context of investigating and vetting John McCain more fully. John McCain has a history of being on sort of the wrong side of a lot of military conflicts, notably, and most recently, the Syria conflict, in which he hired a woman who lied about having a PhD and who was being paid by the Syrian rebels, Elizabeth Obagi, to advise him on foreign policy-related issues. She still works in his office.
He also gets his photograph taken with the wrong people in a war, like ISIS jihadists.
That's right, and Elizabeth Obagi is the woman who introduced John McCain to those ISIS-supported rebels. I had heard all these rumors for many years of John McCain, as a songbird. There was a long kind of history of this, and I, wanted to do something about it. I wanted to go, and what was interesting was I had heard for a long time in the researcher community that this material was out there. There was interviews that John McCain had done in French, or for French broadcast. There were interviews he'd done with other kind of communist outlets, and it was never sort of disclosed to the larger public. And I think it's important for people to understand this. This is a breach of, the U.S. military code of conduct. This is a form of treason. And this is not, a lot of people are of the view this could have been made under duress. John McCain gave other interviews, such as to the Cuban Journalist Association or propaganda operation called Granma, which we have, and I've sent over to Edward. And
I don't know about this one.
Yeah.
What was this interview?
This was another interview he did. It was very matter of fact, describing his treatment while
he gave this interview while he was a POW?
Correct.
To the Cuban news agency?
Correct.
After World War II, the U.S. government prosecuted and convicted and imprisoned Tokyo Rose.
That's right.
Tokyo Rose, the famous traitor in World War II who made radio broadcasts
Yes.
in the Pacific to demoralize American troops during World War II.
But what is chilling to me is his confession to crimes. And just so people understand, we have several people that have served in the military here in the studio, and we've got tons of listeners, tons of veterans out there. You know what they have done to soldiers who have confessed to crimes of aiding and abetting the enemy. They've prosecuted them. They've prosecuted those soldiers. They've prosecuted those sailors. And for this confession to come out at this time, you have to understand, Senator McCain has built his entire career on the legacy of being a hero. And then we have this segment where he confesses to a crime. It makes me angry, really.
And just to recount for our audience, the crime, and referring back to the code of conduct, the U.S. military, U.S. States Armed Forces, Section 3, if I am captured, I will continue to resist by all means available. I will make every effort to escape and aid others to escape. I will accept neither parole nor special favors from the enemy. Section 4, if I become a prisoner of war, I will keep faith with my fellow prisoners. I will give no information or take part in any action which might be harmful to my comrades. If I am senior, I will take command. If not, I will obey the lawful orders of those appointed over me and will back them up in every way.
Yeah, this is significant because what this effectively did by this being broadcast out there is it demoralized American troops that were fighting valiantly on the field of battle there in Vietnam. And the airwave propaganda war that was going on was critical to a lot of the success that the Red Chinese and the Vietnamese were gaining out there in the hearts and minds of American soldiers. They were getting demoralized. They were getting depressed. They were hearing these messages broadcast over and over again. And, I thank our veterans and soldiers and sailors out there that for years held on to the idea. I heard this. I actually heard this with my ears. I know it's out there. I know it exists. You finally have your redemption today.
I think if John McCain had told the American people all along, hey, they tortured me, I broke, I made recordings that I wish I never made, I couldn't take the pressure, I couldn't take the torture, I think we all would have forgiven him. Nobody would have held that against him. The American people are forgiving people.
So long as they have the full story, though.
As you have the whole full story. But he never told us that part of the story. We were always told he was the POW who was tortured and never broke.
Yeah, he's been cashing in at the War Hero Bank for 50 years, and now this makes him overdrawn.
And he's used the POW cover to prevent anybody from criticizing him politically.
Right.
Well, he's facing a very stiff challenge in the Arizona primary. Dr. Kelly Ward from Lake Havasu is running against him, and the Arizona Republican primary is August 30th. John McCain turns age 80 on August 29. He's seeking a 6 6-year term. How many times that recording was rebroadcast over and over and over on North Vietnamese radio?
That's right. There are estimates that it was as many as 30 times, maybe more. But we don't really know. We know that our servicemen heard it in the jungles of Vietnam, that it was used as a propaganda victory. And what was interesting to me is, I remember reading an interview with one of John McCain's captors during the 2008 election, a Vietnamese person who liked John McCain. He actually said all these favorable things about John McCain. It was sort of this interview of a torturer coming and being friends with torturee. But the Vietnamese officer was insistent that John McCain had not been tortured, that John McCain had been very cooperative. And this was sort of the first time I had ever seen any documentation of it. And we had somebody actually over in Vietnam already, and we're going to be pulling out more material as well. But it's going to be a very interesting story. I mean, my interest is your interest, and part of the reason got to be friendly with Edward was, my view is that we should just let people know the truth, and they can judge for themselves what they would do in that circumstance. I mean, there are many examples of American servicemen, including the subject of the film Unbroken, Mr. Zamperini, who did not do propaganda broadcasts for the Japanese. There are many POWs who, for years, have wanted to tell the story about John McCain, and John McCain, as a member of the government, has worked to seal the records of POWs, including his own. And it's about time to actually see some of those things. I mean,
why are the records sealed?
It's a great question. I mean, so this is,
he has worked to seal the records of all POWs?
Correct. And that would include his own. It's not lightly that we make these claims. They're certainly subject. John McCain is free to sue me for libel or for defamation for being involved in this. And of course, truth is a defense against libel and defamation. So I suspect that there won't be a lot of attention brought to it. My concern is that the POW issue and covering up what happened to the POWs and keeping their records sealed was a negotiating tactic that was used in the Treaty of Paris to sort of end the Vietnam War. And what ended up happening is we left people behind. And so this is a chapter in American history. It was sort of one of the longest military engagements that we've ever been in. And so we've covered up a lot of what actually happened there. And it's extremely disturbing to think about what else we might not know about that period. And to think that John McCain has been at the center of the national discourse on the military. He's gotten security briefings, that he's always been in a position where he could have been blackmailed on this question is disturbing. We don't want people to be blackmailed. We don't want them to be in a position where they can be extorted by our enemies. And so this is a serious concern.
Then Rick Wiles chimed in with,
well, my major complaint with John McCain, greater than his support for amnesty for illegal immigrants. But the thing that makes me furious about John McCain has been his involvement in the war in the Middle East, where he has been part of the war machine that has funneled money and weapons and ammo to the so-called rebels, which are nothing other than jihadists that are attacking the government of Syria, of President Assad. John McCain has been up to his eyeballs in that war, which means he knows that he's helping ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And he knows that they are killing Christians in Syria and Iraq. And I cannot let this man get off without being called down and challenged for that despicable act. And I will never, ever let that man get away with what he did. Christians have died. He has helped Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton turn the Middle East into a nightmare where hundreds of thousands, literally millions of people have been uprooted and dislodged from their homes, cities bombed and destroyed, churches bombed and destroyed, pastors impaled on crosses, Christian children sawed in half, Christian moms and dads crucified on crosses. And John McCain's hands are dripping with Christian blood.
That's right.
So maybe Almighty God today is revealing the truth about John McCain.
You know, it's interesting when you go and you look through John McCain's contributors that have given to this 2016 campaign. He's got a lot of money that he's gotten since 2012, over $4 or $5 million, and much of it comes from groups that depend upon globalization. You know, there's the Blackstone group in there. There's Elliott Management, which is, of course, connected to Paul Singer, who's the billionaire who's backing up Paul Ryan. And, of course, there's all the different military contractors. There's Raytheon. There's General Atomics. There's a lot of serious questions about how John McCain profits from these sort of engagements. I mean, John McCain has been in favor of, intervening militarily in a great number of countries: Russia, Iran, Syria, Burma, all throughout Africa. And so we really have to be aware of John McCain's past here as a way of understanding. And John McCain has had a series of sort of being on the wrong side of issues, that are, things like amnesty, of course, but climate change, global warming, alarmism. We've seen him categorically, McCain-Feingold, of course, famously, where he was in favor of speech restrictions that would bar the kind of independent broadcasts that we're doing today.
Yeah.
And so he's got a history here. And he's got a history of the Keating 5 scandal, of course, which has been somewhat forgotten. He was very close to Jack Abramoff, who, of course, was brought down. So he's got a history of sort of getting by. And one of the ways he protects himself from any and all criticism is he pretends that he's a war hero, that he is this great and noble man. And my grandfather earned the Navy Cross. He went to Annapolis. He did not graduate bottom of his class. You can look it up, Dwight Lyman Johnson. And there are many, many people, including some of the people who are in this room, who serve the country and who don't use it as a political weapon against their adversaries, and who did it out of love of country and not out of personal enrichment or growing their larger relationships. And so it's very disturbing. My fear on this issue, I think we're at a stage now where you can't cover everything up as you once were able to, because the internet makes it so that people can hear for themselves this broadcast. They can do their own investigations. I encourage people, as I say at all these things, to email me, Charles at WeSearcher or editor at Got News if they've got their own investigations. If it's very good, I'll end up hiring you. And so I'm very much of the view that the people are now becoming the media when it comes to these things. And what I have found disturbing over the years is just the sheer number of people who've come to me, said, John McCain was a songbird. Why is nobody listening about this? Why is nobody talking about this? And it's a perennial kind of thing. And it raises all kinds of questions about all of the different decisions he's made over the years, that I think it's time that McCain, who, promised to build us a fence, build the dang fence. That was his ad in 2010 when he was walking with, the controversial sheriff Paul Babu on the border there. He was, and by the way, Paul Babu is, a gay man who slept with an illegal immigrant at the same time he was supposedly defending the territory of the United States as a sheriff. So John McCain has a history of people who he associates with who have not always had the interests of the sovereignty of the United States or of the people as a whole. And hopefully, if he wins the election, and he's under 50 in the polling, but if he wins the election, hopefully we've now taken away something so he can actually be more truthful. I mean, we should be...
Well, most likely, Charles, the Democrats will pick up the Senate seat. If Kelly Ward does not defeat him in the primary August 30th,
that seems likely.
The Democrats will pick up the